I saw him before he saw me. Devin stood by the patio, pretending to adjust the grill knobs, shoulders hunched the way they always were when he was hiding something. From where I sat inside the kitchen, I could see his reflection in the glass door, his hand slipping something small and dark into the outer pocket of my work backpack. He moved quickly, like a man afraid of being caught, but too desperate to stop himself. Then he straightened, wiped his palms on his jeans, and smiled as if nothing had happened. I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettles people more than accusation ever could. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I was still the mother who would believe anything he said, no matter how thin the lie. But that version of me was gone. She'd disappeared the night he emptied my savings account and called it an accident. I waited until he went upstairs, his footsteps fading into the hallway above. Then I opened the backpack. Inside, wrapped in crumpled tissue, was something hard and heavy. I carried it upstairs to his room, the air smelling faintly of cologne and dust, and slid the bundle into the middle drawer of his dresser, beneath a pair of mismatched socks. When I came back down, I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat at the table. Devin returned minutes later, phone in hand, acting casual. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Just tired." He nodded, relieved. I could almost feel his tension ease, like he thought the worst part was over. I sipped my tea, the glass sweating in my hand. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Outside, I saw the flash of blue uniforms through the screen door. Devin turned pale, then looked at me. "Mom," he whispered. "Don't say anything." The night before the police showed up, it was meatloaf again. I'd made it out of habit more than hunger, the same way I still folded Devin's laundry, even when it sat untouched in the basket for days. The oven buzzed. The air smelled faintly of onions and ground beef. I set the table for 3. Devin was already fuming when he sat down. He didn't even touch his plate. He just stared at me, jaw clenched. "We need 1,500, he said like it was a line rehearsed on the ride home. By Friday. I didn't answer right away. Across the table, Marla shifted in her chair. Eyes, puffy makeup cracked and streaking along her cheekbone. Her fingers turned the ring on her hand over and over, like a nervous tick. I looked at my son. 30 years old, living in the house he once begged me to sell a man who never once paid a utility bill on time. "No," I said, plain as I could. The sound Devin made wasn't quite a sigh. It was closer to something breaking. He slammed his fist on the table. The salt shaker tipped, spilling across the tablecloth. "Dad would have helped," he said. The fork in my hand stopped midair. The word Dad hung between us like a threat. Marla started to cry, quiet, soft, familiar. She always cried when he didn't get his way. I stood, pushed back my chair slowly, the legs groaning against the tile. My plate was still full. I hadn't touched the food, and now I wouldn't. I walked upstairs without saying another word. By the time I reached the landing, their voices had dropped to whispers. I couldn't hear the words, just the tone, low, sharp, conspiring. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photograph of my husband, still in its frame on the dresser. His smile looked smaller than I remembered. Downstairs, the microwave beeped, reheating something no one had really wanted in the first place. In the morning, the trash had already been taken out, but the backpack still sat by the door. I spent the next morning in the workshop, smoothing the edge of a pine bench I'd started last week. The shavings curled to the floor like old stories, peeling back layers I didn't want to look at too closely. My hands knew the rhythm: press, slide, lift, repeat. It kept the thoughts at bay until it didn't. I remember selling Jonah's toolbox. Full set, heavy steel still smelled like engine grease and aftershave. The man who bought it smiled too much, said he'd give it a good home. I told him not to scratch the lid. Then I used the money to cover Devin's second DUI. I remember lying in a hospital bed full in my arm chest, tight, from the pneumonia they caught late. Devin leaned over, kissed my forehead, and said, "Don't worry about the bills, Mom." I signed the papers. Power of attorney, just in case, he said. I woke up 30 days later to find the emergency fund emptied and my savings account closed. But when he called months after losing his job, I still said yes. I let him come home. Just for a few weeks, Marla had promised. She showed up with a single suitcase and 6 boxes. I gave them the guest room and moved my sewing machine into the dining corner. The bank notices started a few weeks after that. Insurance late. Utilities overdue. Devin said he was figuring things out. Marla said they'd pay me back once she got through her medical stuff. I said nothing, just kept sanding. The truth is, it wasn't that I didn't see it. It was that I didn't want to admit what I was seeing. If I said it out loud, I'd have to stop hoping he'd change. I'd have to face what I'd let him do, what I'd let him become. By noon, the bench edge was smooth. The dust settled, and I knew what had to come next. I wiped my hands on my apron, set the sandpaper down, and walked inside, just as Devin walked out the front door. Suit, pressed smile, too clean. Devin came home that evening whistling. I hadn't heard him do that since he was a teenager. He carried Flowers' steak and 2 bottles of red wine like a man who'd just conquered something worth celebrating. Marla trailed behind him, with a grin stretched too wide, her voice higher than usual. "Guess what, Mom?" he said, dropping the grocery bag on the counter. "I got hired. Tech firm downtown. Benefits, full salary, everything." Marla clapped her hands. "Finally, I told you things were turning around." She leaned in to kiss his cheek. I smiled because that's what mothers are trained to do. But something in his excitement didn't sit right. Devin had never celebrated this hard for anything real. He didn't look at me when he said the company's name. Didn't even look at me when he raised his glass later. Just kept talking about opportunity and change while cutting into his steak like he was playing a role. Marla kept the wine flowing. She told me about office parties and gym memberships, words spilling out like she was trying to fill the space. I kept nodding, watching her eyes flick toward Devin every few seconds, as if making sure she was still hitting her cues. When dinner ended, Devin stood abruptly. "I left my offer letter upstairs," he said. "I'll show you." He disappeared up the staircase. I gathered plates, rinsed them under running water. The kitchen window looked out over the backyard. The grill sat in the same spot as always, my work backpack resting on the chair beside it where I'd left it that afternoon. I turned off the faucet, letting the sound fade. Through the glass, I saw him, bending over the bag, unzipping it with careful hands. Looking around, shoulders tense. He took something from his pocket, small, dark, and wrapped, and slid it inside. Then he zipped it closed and walked back toward the house, smiling again, wiping his palms on his jeans. By the time he stepped through the back door, I was already pouring the rest of the wine down the sink. The moment I heard the pipes groan upstairs, I moved. The water running meant I had 5, maybe 6 minutes. Devin always took his time when he wanted to rehearse his tone in the mirror. I unzipped the backpack slowly, the metal teeth sounding louder than I expected in the quiet. I pulled apart the layers, gloves, tape measure, work folder, and there it was wrapped in black tissue paper, like a secret someone didn't want found. When I opened it, the air felt heavier. A diamond ring round halo setting flawless in the worst way. It wasn't a prop. It had weight and cost. I didn't panic. I just stared at it the way you look at a memory that still stings. Years ago, I might have cried. I might have asked him why, what he was thinking, if he needed help. But I didn't have those questions in me anymore. Only space where they used to live. I walked upstairs. The floorboard near the banister creaked the way it always had. I didn't avoid it. Let him know I moved. Let him wonder. In his room, I went to the middle drawer. Socks balled up a few loose receipts. I dug a little trench, placed the ring deep under cotton and threadbare elastic, then closed the drawer. I brought out the paperweight from the desk, the heavy brass one shaped like an old ship's wheel. It fit just fine in the tissue paper. I wrapped it up, folded it exactly how he had, and slipped it back into the same spot in my backpack. By the time I zipped it closed, the water had stopped. I was back at the grill when he came out. Hair still damp, shirt changed, voice light. "How's that fire looking?" he asked. "Almost there," I said. He picked up the tongs and turned the steaks. "How do you want yours, medium?" I said, brushing past him. "Like always." He smiled, relaxed again. He thought I was back in place. He didn't notice me glance at the driveway, at the flicker of blue lights turning the corner 2 blocks down. The knock was firm, 3 quick raps. I didn't move. Devin opened the door before I could even reach the hallway. 3 officers stood there. Calm, no weapons drawn, but everything about them said serious. Devin stepped aside quickly, already rehearsed. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice just a touch shaky. It's in her backpack." "The ring. I saw it there this afternoon." I stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed. Marla hovered behind him, her hand over her mouth, wide-eyed, like a schoolgirl in a bad play. One of the officers' woman, late 40s, clipboard tucked under her arm, nodded. "We received a report about stolen property." "A diamond ring. May we take a look?" I didn't resist. I retrieved the backpack and set it on the table. Devin leaned in a little too close. "Front pocket," he said, wrapped in black tissue. They unzipped it, slow, careful. One officer began pulling out items: gloves, a tape measure, a stained notepad. No tissue, no ring. They checked the other pockets, side, top, bottom. Nothing. The officer looked up at me, then at Devin. Her brow creased. "Are you sure this is the correct bag? It has to be," Devin said. His voice cracked on the last word. The silence felt like it stretched across years. That's when I spoke. Calm, quiet. "Maybe check the middle drawer in the guest room." "Under the socks." Devin turned to me, jaw open, panic flashing across his face. "What? That's why she's lying." The lead officer gave a nod, and one of the younger men headed upstairs. Marla didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her eyes were already glassy, like she was realizing the scene wasn't playing out the way they'd planned. We stood there in the kitchen, the grill smoke still lingering through the screen door. The sound of footsteps on carpet. A drawer sliding open. Silence. Then a call from upstairs. Found it. Devin took 1 step back. The officers didn't move. And I finally exhaled as the handcuffs came out. They took him out through the front door. I stayed seated. Devin didn't resist. He looked stunned, more embarrassed than afraid. When they cuffed him, he didn't yell. He just looked back at me like I was the one who'd broken something sacred. "You don't understand," he said as they led him across the porch. I needed a way out. The screen door slammed behind them. Marla stood frozen in the entryway, mascara-streaked hands shaking, but she didn't follow, didn't shout after him. She sat on the bottom stair and stared at the floor. I poured myself a glass of water and left her there. That night, the house was too quiet. No footsteps above, no voices through the vent. Just me and the kitchen table and the folder I hadn't opened in over a year. I spread the papers out one by one. Loan agreements, credit card applications. Signatures written in my hand, each one a bruise I'd given myself in the name of trust. 12 documents, $14,000, and not a single repayment. At the bottom of the stack, I found the power of attorney form. I stared at it for a long time. The date, the hospital name, Devin's neat signature beside mine. I folded it in half. Then again, then once more, until it was no bigger than my palm. The flame caught quickly in the sink. It curled inward, blackened, flaked. I watched it burn without blinking. Smoke drifted up through the vent. I wondered if Marla could smell it. "You don't understand," he'd said. But I did. I understood better than he ever thought I could. I rinsed the ashes down the drain, wiped the counter, turned off the light. In the dark, I whispered, "So did I." 2 weeks later, I sat in the witness box under the humming lights and told the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't add anything extra. I just said what I saw. Devin slipping something into my backpack. Devin smiling like nothing happened. Devin pointing at me when the police showed up pretending to be afraid. I answered every question with the same steady tone. The prosecutor didn't need much from me. The facts did the work. Then came the footage. Security camera. Devin in a baseball cap and jacket pacing the edge of a jewelry counter like he didn't know what to do until he did. He smashed the case with a crowbar, grabbed a ring, and ran. No mask, no panic. Just practiced movement. They paused the video on his face. He looked confused, like a man wondering how he got there. I didn't look over at him, but I felt him shrinking. Each time the clerk read out a charge, it seemed to take a piece of him. Theft, false report, attempted fraud. He didn't look at me. Not once. Marla sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, her hands folded tight in her lap. When the judge read her sentence, 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and a move-out order, she nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. And when they stood, Devin up, shackled at the wrists, and led him through the side door, she didn't look back. Neither did I. Outside, the wind had picked up. I held an empty folder in my arms. It used to carry papers about insurance and debt and power of attorney. Now, it held nothing. And that felt right. The reporters tried to ask questions as I walked toward the parking lot. Something about forgiveness. Something about family. I didn't stop. Inside the car, I stared at the steering wheel for a long time. Not crying, not angry, just quiet. When I turned the key, the engine caught fast. Strong. By the time I pulled out of the courthouse lot, I already knew where I was going next. The house sold faster than I thought it would. A young couple with 2 kids and a Labrador fell in love with the front porch and the backyard oak tree. They didn't ask many questions, just smiled and called it charming. I packed slowly, 1 room at a time. I took only what mattered: the quilt Joan had made the winter before his diagnosis, the photo albums with their cracked leather spines. The rest stayed behind. Furniture, dishes, curtains, all of it belonged to another life. Someone else could make it theirs. On the last morning, I stood in the hallway with a single suitcase and the sound of birds outside. I was locking the back door when I heard the car pull in. Marla stepped out, hair tied back, wearing a hoodie I hadn't seen since the day of Devin's sentencing. 1 duffel bag over her shoulder. "I don't have anywhere else," she said. I looked at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pretending. I didn't ask what she wanted. I already knew. She expected softness. 1 more extension of grace. I walked back into the house and returned with a folded sheet of paper. I handed it to her. "There's a women's shelter 2 towns over," I said. "They have open beds. I called this morning." She looked at it. Didn't take it right away. When she finally did, her fingers tightened around the edges, but her mouth didn't move. No thank you. No apology. She turned and walked back to her car. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. Some people burn bridges. Others just stand on the edge and watch you drown. I stepped into my truck. The engine started clean. A new set of keys was already in the glove compartment, apartment address, mailbox number, Denver zip code. The driveway, the porch, even the oak tree, I left them behind without looking back. And as I turned onto the highway, I realized I wasn't escaping anything. I was simply moving forward. The apartment is small, just a rectangle above a hardware store with creaky floors and a stubborn heater that clinks in the middle of the night. But it's mine. No one else has a key. No one else leaves dishes in the sink. I fix stools for the cafe next door. Trade repairs for coffee and quiet conversation. The owner, Callie, pays me in small bills and extra muffins. She never asks about my past, only if I prefer walnut or plain. There's no porch here, no backyard to rake or oak tree to lean against, but the windows face east, and every morning, light pours through them like something I had to earn. It spreads across the floor, touches the walls, lands gently on the quilt at the foot of my bed. I sleep better here. Not because it's quieter, but because the silence is finally mine. One night, while unpacking the last box, I found the envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with a brittle strip of tape. Jonah's handwriting on the front, neat, steady, the kind of penmanship he only used when it mattered. Inside was a single note. No date. No greeting. Just one line. Don't let the good parts of you be taken piece by piece. I read it 3 times, then read it again with my eyes closed. I found a frame the next morning at the thrift store down the block, cleaned the glass, pressed the note behind it, and hung it above my small desk where I keep my tools and unfinished sketches. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at it without meaning to, especially in the quiet moments between sanding and measuring, between wiping the counter and turning out the light. There's not much here, but everything that remains belongs to me. The past took pieces, but not all of them. Some I held on to, others I'm still finding. And in the quiet warmth of this second-story apartment, with the city humming below and the sunrise pouring in, I finally feel like I'm starting to put them back together.